I'd love to hear from you. If you could let me know where you're from, that would be great. I would love to hear where you're from and what your maybe what your craft is. Thanks. Hi, Kat. How you doing? Okay. So today's topic, so let me introduce myself first. I am Kathy Dillon. I am from Bruce Business Services. I'm the owner and CEO. I will have these weekly talks to discuss various topics related to bookkeeping for artists and crafters. That's the group that I help most of all. We're going to talk about 1099 and NEC, non-employee compensations this week. And I'll go over it verbally. And then if you would like to send me a private message or in the chat with your email address, I would be very happy to send you the PDF that we have, which has more information. I'll show it to you a little bit, has more information about 1099 NECs. And that could get you started with that part of your year-end process. All right, so 1099 NEC. So first of all, I think you've probably all heard of what a 1099 is. I think we've all been around the corner enough to know that. But as an artist at a business, you're probably aware of like a lot of accounting tasks that have to be done towards the end of the year, tracking down missing receipts, finding missing invoices, all those kind of things that have to, so you can clean up the end of your year. 1099s are a task that give a lot of small business owners a lot of pause, and the reason why they do that is because there's a lot of moving parts to it. So in order to do a 1099, the first thing you have to do is do a W-9, which is basically getting the information from all of your contractors. And we're going to talk about who needs a 1099 in a minute, but this is the first step. W-9, which is basically an intake form. And so for an independent contractor, so you're gathering, when you're hiring this contractor, you're gathering information about the contractor. So you're gathering social security numbers, name, address, whatnot, so that if you meet the threshold for issuing a 1099, you have all the information available to yourself. And it's very, very good practice to, whenever you're hiring a contractor, whether or not you think they may or may not go over the threshold or meet the threshold, that you get a a W-9. By having that, you'll be able to be prepared at the end of the year. You may have a budget of $500 and you go over the $600 limit and you meet all the other criteria, and now you got to go chasing it because you didn't get it in the beginning. So that's what the W-9 is. It's basically an intake form. It's kind of like if you were getting hired for a regular business job where you got a W-2. It's those first forms that you fill out when you're getting hired. So a 1099 NEC is basically the document that the independent contractor receives from you, confirming the payments or income that they've received. So you paid them a certain amount of money and you're reporting that to them, the contractor, and you're also going to report it to the IRS and any state authorities that need to be told. So, and then that service provider or contractor will use that to complete their taxes. So who needs a 1099? And there's several criteria, and I'm going to go over them generally, and then you'll have some pretty good information to review with your contractors. The first one is criteria is, did you pay the contractor at least $600? That's the minimum threshold. If you haven't met that, then the rest of the criteria don't matter. You have to pay them at least $600 in the calendar year. That's one. The next one thing is, was the payment for a service? Payments for services to individuals other than your employees are considered independent. They are considered to be independent contractors. And that includes attorneys, includes bookkeepers, includes anybody who's giving you a service. If you buy product of any kind from them, whether it's to go into your cost of goods sold, or whether it's just staples and paper clips and whatnot, those are not considered to be independent contractors or services. So the next one is whether or not if the services weren't related to real estate agents, property managers, or storage units, then you don't need to issue a 1099 because those are not considered independent contractor income. This is an IRS code thing. It may be considered other income if you're renting out space, and depending on whether or not you're renting from another, the type of person that you're renting from. And that would be a 1099 miscellaneous, which is a whole nother topic of discussion. But so that's another thing to talk to your tax attorney or your bookkeeper about. Then the next criteria is if the service was provided by a corporation. Generally speaking, corporations are excluded from being issued 1099s because they are corporations. So if you are just working with individual people who are LLCs or sole proprietors, that kind of thing, then you wouldn't have to worry about, then you'd have to issue a 1099. If you were working with an actual corporation, then you wouldn't have to do a 1099. And then the last criteria would be, how did you pay them? Did you pay them with a credit card or a third-party network, for example, PayPal? If you did that, the payments to the independent contractor through either of those methods, then it's up to the credit card or PayPal or Stripe or wherever to report the transaction. And the 1099 would not be issued by you, which is, I know a lot of people who use that method. They pay their independent contractors through PayPal. And one of the biggest reasons why they do it is because they want they don't have to deal with the 1099s, and you don't, because you do it. PayPal will issue them for them. So that's another great way to go, and another option. And, you do pay fees for that, but it's an option. So who needs a 1099 NEC? Bookkeepers and tax accountants lots of times work together to make sure your business is successful. A bookkeeper knows a lot about 1099s, but a tax accountant is really the kind of the final word on it if there's any kind of gray area. So your bookkeeper really can establish a nice process for it, but it's also best to consult with your tax accountant as well. And the last thing I want to say is that January can be a really overwhelming time with so much stuff to do, especially for artists. And you have bills coming in from the holidays. You have trying to reconcile your books and get ready for the end of the year and get ready for taxes. And I just want to reiterate the point that getting your W-9s up front as you hire the contractors is the very best way to go, so that issuing 1099 is a very simple process, or can be a very simple process if you are prepared ahead of time, and that's the key. And your bookkeeper can help you with that too, as well. So that's the presentation. I was wondering, does anybody have any questions? I would love to hear from anybody who's here. Let's see. Okay, payments via Venmo. That's a great area. I think that they are a third-party processor. I will have to double check that, but I think as a third-party processor, they also would be issuing their own 1099. But I will double check that, and I will post it on our Facebook page. Venmo. Okay, great. Thanks, Diane. I appreciate your question. I got a couple other questions offline that I thought I'd share with the group. What if I cannot find the person to obtain the W-9? So the IRS does have some methods for dealing with that. So what I would suggest to do is contact, if you can't get the information, get as much information as you can, and then contact your tax accountant or your bookkeeper for further information, because there are ways to turn in a 1099 NEC without a social security number, but you have to do a couple extra forms in order to make it okay for that. So that's one way to go. And then one other question I had was, do I have to file 1099 NEC for state as well as federal? And the answer is, if you're required to, you do it. In most states, as far as I know, every state or nearly every state requires a 1099 NEC. If you require it for the federal, then you require it for the state. So that is that answer. So I wanted to, so that's that. Again, I'm Kathy Gillen. I'm from Bruce Business Services, and If you will send me your email address, either in the chat or via in Venmo is owned by PayPal. I'm not sure if Venmo is owned by PayPal. Diane, do you know that answer? I'm not sure. It's a good question, though. So I wanted to let you know that tonight on the WAFA community page, I will be doing a preview of my workshop, which is on Thursday. And that workshop will be on financial statements and how to read them and how to interpret them. And so that's Thursday. And I will put a link. Actually, there's a link on my Facebook page. If you're looking for under events, I can put it in the chat as well. And then, but tonight I'll be doing a preview of that event on the Will of Fiber Arts, our WAFA page. If you're in that community, then you're absolutely welcome to join. I would love to speak with you. If you want more content and want to be want to get notifications that we're live, which we do every week at least, then join my like my page, Boost Business Services, and I also have a group called Crafty Business Owners, where we discuss all kinds of business-related topics, but geared towards artists and crafters. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next week. Take care.